We want to move on now to conclude what we began last week, which is taking a look at how cabinet secretaries performed in the first term of the Jubilee administration. I want to kick it off with the Minister or the Secretary for Finance and the National Treasury, Henry Rotich. Let's talk about the mandate quite quickly of the ministry. It's to promote economic transformation for shared growth through formulation and implementation of prudent economic and financial policy at the national and county levels. You know his background. He was the head of the macroeconomics at the Treasury since March 2006, and he's been involved, in the preparation of key budgets. From that time, he's a career civil servant right from school, so pretty much a man cut out for the job. He has had a lot of challenges, though. Obviously, when it comes to counties, they've been complaining about delays in the disbursement of funds. Under his tenure, also, we've seen Kenya on the largest borrowing spree, with the government debt as a percentage of GDP rising from 800 billion to 2.5 trillion shillings by the end of 2016. And then, of course, there were the issues surrounding Eurobond, where the opposition maintained that money was stolen. That was not proven still. So, gentlemen, Henry Rotich, how has he performed? Prof.
I thought you would talk about Abida Mohammed and the release of the Sudanese first, but the Kenyans in Sudan. But how that?
Right, of course, yes. We talked about that last week.
Yes, but of course, probably they listen because now Amina Mohammed has acquired more marks by having these people released. We discussed it, and it's good. Somebody's listening in this government, even if they don't watch our television when we have our show. And now, let me just quickly go to this point now of Rotich. One of the things that I have with the Mheshimiwa Rotich is whether it is the government, especially the executive, is the one that advises him, or he's the one who advises government. You get the impression that they tell him what to do. Even when they have done something wrong, they tell him to justify it. But since he's a technocrat in the ministry, you expect him to be telling the government about this. For example, you have mentioned the Eurobond. I think the explanations that were made by him to justify how the money for Eurobond was used, he kept on saying things which we can't believe. And just quickly, I want to tell you that what we teach our students in the university is that when you bring so much money into the economy, especially foreign exchange, the shilling itself behaves differently. It increases strength, and therefore the exchange rates become different because now the shilling becomes strong, and then you need more to spend less Kenyan shillings to get a dollar. But again, that means that when you have a lot of money circulating from other countries, especially the hard currencies, again, you know very well that what happens is the banks now do not have anybody to pick money for their money. So domestic borrowing goes down, and the banks start looking for customers, clients from the public, and that means it enhances access to credit. This did not happen. Well, so what economics are we hearing from Treasury? It is only economics that can be taught from Treasury. It cannot be economics that we teach even in our national university. So we don't understand how this money came in, and instead the interest rates went up until government had to do a legislation to cut down the parliament. So
has he not? Are you saying has he not performed then by not being in the position to advise government that it's not the right direction to go?
My thinking is that probably he knows the right thing, but somebody forces him in government to say things that don't even respect his own discipline, which is his economic background.
Stay or go.
So in my opinion, he should be given another job, because I don't think we believe most of the things he says. People don't believe them, and if they don't believe them, then they think that government is making mistakes. So he shouldn't stay.
All right, James, stay or go.
Henry Rotich is the cabinet secretary to start off the whole monolith of devolution, and I think so far I would give him a good rating. Not necessarily performed to the highest expectation, but he's done fairly well. Please understand that the first Uhuru administration took over the implementation of Vision 2030 in the medium term. And these incorporated new structures of government at county level, and you've seen expanded infrastructural programs and so on and so forth. How are we going to finance this? The economy wasn't growing as quickly, and of course, this government has to deliver on some of those services. So what I need to say about him is, I think should he get an opportunity to serve in the next cabinet, he should probably centralize or focus his intervention in assisting small businesses to grow, because I see that as the place where we are going to get the answer for unemployment. I see him as most likely going to have to concentrate more on interventions in agro-processing and agriculture, because you know, and that about 80% of the rural population in this country is employed directly in agriculture in the rural areas. So we need to look at the general policy on how we want to move some important sectors of the economy and have Cabinet Secretary Rotich refocus. That is if he's retained. Otherwise, I would give him a good rating and he should remain.
All right, we are going to move on now to Professor Jacob Kaimenyi. He's the Cabinet Secretary for Lands, Housing and Urban Development. You'll remember that he was moved from the Ministry of Education after a rather rough patch with unions. So let's talk about the mandate of the ministry, which is, of course, the National Lands Policy, its management, physical planning, land transactions, survey and mapping, land adjudication, settlement matters, settlement plannings, valuation and services, administration of public land, etc. He oversaw the enactment of two critical land laws, the Land Laws Amendment Act of 2016 and the Community Land Act of 2016, partial digitization of some of the land processes at the ministry, setting up of a task force to investigate the status of lease renewal and extension, and various other things. But of course, he also benefited, if you like, from Jubilee policy in terms of giving of title deeds. He also has set up a task force to investigate the status of lease renewal and extension, and this remains the bane, if you like, of some of these lands. We see a lot of issues still around, you know, historical or ancestral land and those leases. So a mixed bag. How do you think he performed, Danson?
Professor of Debt History has failed totally to explain what he's doing. I thought he could have had an explanatory process of explaining what the Cabinet Secretary for Lands is supposed to do. He's done a tremendous job in policy formulation. He's done a tremendous job in trying to get cartels outside the Ministry of Lands. But he has failed to tell Kenyans what he's doing. I wish he could be able to explain himself. I think when he was a minister for CS for education, he made serious mistakes and the public was on his case. And when he went to the lands, his advisors or handlers told him that keep quiet, just do your paperwork. That has also dented how he has done his work. But in terms of vision, he's a very good professor. But the question to me is that he must exit that position because he is an education. He is more of a medical person. He cannot really understand issues of conveyances. He cannot really understand the issues of land. The number of Kenyans who kill each other because of land from every village in this country, the CS should address that. The transfer of land from one person to another, the question of obtaining by false pretenses, people who have lost their properties, the question of illegal transfer of properties. Land now that was government land does not exist. The playing fields that children used to go does not exist. So we need somebody who can move along with the public. Professor can only move alone. That might be the reason because he has never been a politician. So in my own view is if
exit the cabinet,
he must exit.
All right, Steve, your thoughts on that, and especially this issue of, you know, we're seeing, like, for instance, take Laikipia. We seem to be unable to deal with this issue of, you know, historical land injustice, of how, you know, colonial settlers got land, and it's such a touchy topic. Nobody seems, you know, willing to deal with it, and people are hurting from it. How do you think he's performed?
I think for me, a professor should stay. I find him as a team player. Remember, he's reduced the squabbles between the ministry and senior land officials. If you compare and contrast his tenure and that of Ngilu, for instance, you see he's made tremendous improvement He's also indefatigable. He brings good intentions. But remember, the Minister of Lands, it's a very tricky one, because this is one minister that involves lawyers, politicians, and all of these people falsify, and they seek to falsify the vision that the minister is pushing through. I think with the kind of attitude that he brings along, if he's allowed a second opportunity, he may consolidate the gains. He has spent his time studying and understanding how that ministry operates. And if we change, the Ministry of Lands particularly, if you keep on changing cabinet secretary before they get co-opted into the system, how the system runs, and be able to begin to change it, I think he should be given another chance. If you are really to assess him effectively, because he's been there briefly, I think he was moved from education to lands, and immediately we see now there's some semblance of symbiotic relationship between the cabinet secretary and the National Land Commission. There's no longer the squabbling, and I think the other issues are sectoral issues that go beyond the person of Kaimenyi. We must process them through the proper lenses of what they are. The illegal and irregular land allocations, you know, the fake title deeds involve lawyers, they involve other players, they involve politicians, and it's unfair.
But where does the back stop? It's true, but where does the back stop?
If you are to assess Kaimenyi's performance based on bringing a collegiate approach, a team player, someone with vision, someone with an indefatigable attitude, I think he's the right man for the job. In any case, look at the past ministers who have been there, including the former Lands Minister, Orengo himself. You know, as a politician, you could know how to make statements that speak to the people without necessarily pushing a real transformative agenda. I think Prof has done well, only that he has not communicated it effectively. If he improves on communication, he may be able to consolidate the gains that he has made in the last term. And
I understand what you're saying, and I don't mean it's now specific to you know, the CS Kaimenyi, but as a generality for all of them, there is the role of that collegiality, but at the end of the day, there must be the result out of it, I suppose, is what people are looking for. So less squabble, I mean, does less squabbles equal better performance?
I think let him stay.
I'm not, it wasn't specific about him, it was a general thing, but that all very well and good. Gentlemen, because we're pressed for time, let's move on to the next cabinet secretary, Cecily Kanini Kariuki. She is the Secretary for Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs. You'll remember that she came into this position after the giant devolution ministry was split following the exit of Anne Waiguru under a cloud of corruption allegations. So she is a former Chief Executive Officer of the Tea Board of Kenya, where it is believed that she performed rather well. She was responsible for bringing the tea industry to become Kenya's top foreign exchange earner to a tune of over 130 billion shillings. So in her current role, some of the achievements as cited by her team: improved awareness of gender-based violence and its negative impact on the well-being of victims and their families, greater willingness on the part of victims to report and speak out seeking assistance, that of course being on the gender affairs side. When it comes to the youth side, the creation of at least 6.5 million jobs, entrepreneurship support for the youth by creating the Biashara Bank, by merging the Micro and Small Enterprise Authority, the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, the Women Enterprise Fund, I beg your pardon, all of these providing coordination for the delivery of affordable financing to support business growth. If you were to take NYS specifically, these youth are organized into 500 SACCOs with cumulative savings in excess of 2 billion shillings.
So, Anne.
Yes.
This lady should remain because of two reasons. First of all, she's fiercely loyal, and President Kenyatta would need such a person. She's fiercely loyal. She's also very rational when she's making her comments. She has also worked hard to remove the bad publicity that her ministry had when her predecessor was serving the same docket. So she goes around her business. You get an impression she's committed. She talks about issues. Even up to this evening, she was talking about gender-based violence. By the way, she was participating in public debate on that. So she's not a showbiz type, but she performs her work. You can feel what she's doing. You can see it. I think the ministry is on the right path. She just needs to continue asking for more funding, especially when you talk about the youth. and persuade Parliament to be on her side so that they can allocate her more money, because the challenges in that ministry are enormous. So, in my opinion, she stays.
Okay. Is she placed in the right, we've talked about her expertise, especially in agriculture, etc. She may stay in the cabinet, but is she playing her strength?
I think, first and foremost, to add to my voice to Professor, that she should stay. She has a proven track record. We have known her since her service at the T-Board of Kenya. She did exemplary well. I have known her in the Ministry of Agriculture as a principal secretary,
yes,
where she also performed extremely well. The important question here is her current location the best place for her?
Exactly.
That would be a different discussion. But I think even if she's given another role, considering that track record, she would do very well. But I think she's also well placed in the ministry because she has managed to mainstream youth and gender affairs. She's managed to do very good things in relation to the public service. And I think once somebody starts on a course like that, it would be good if she's given the opportunity to complete that work. What we will see from that process is probably innovatively starting programs within that ministry so as to answer to the big problem that we have of youth unemployment, and generally assisting this administration in mainstreaming youth and gender affairs for the sole purpose of investing for the future of this country, which is actually the youth.
Well, let me, because of the huge issues surrounding agriculture, and we do know that it's obviously going to be a priority in this second and final term, is she best placed at, not that she hasn't done a good job, she has, that's what the consensus, but could she do more for the country, playing to her strength or perceived strength?
I wouldn't hesitate for a single second appointing her the cabinet secretary in charge of agriculture.
Okay.
You know very well that agriculture in this country today is run under a very big policy, an overarching policy under Vision 2030. And as I've said before, 25% of GDP in this country depends directly on agriculture. Another 25% of GDP depends on agriculture through interlinkages, processing, manufacturing and raw materials, and so on and so forth. And any government that identifies agriculture as the biggest driver of economic growth is going to do very well, because as we said earlier, a big percentage of Kenyans are actually employed in agriculture. And if you have someone like Cecily Kariuki to drive that particular process, then you are going to get a big population going forward much faster, which is going to result in very good economic growth numbers in the short run. We are now implementing Vision 2030 in the medium term, and under the agricultural sector there is a program called ASDS, which requires re-engineering and re-innovation. We need to get someone who can look at the broad aspiration that we have in the Jubilee Manifesto, especially in the agriculture sector, and then translate that into an actionable program within the 5 years that the Jubilee administration is going to have, and move that forward. And I think, to be honest, that Cecily Kariuki is one such type of person that you are looking for in that ministry.
All right, let's talk more about it, Prof, when we get to CS Willibet. But for now, we move on to Najib Balala. He is the Cabinet Secretary for Tourism, certainly a familiar role for him. The mandate of the ministry is to, develop a responsible tourism policy in terms of its management and product development. The department develops the National Tourism Strategy and matters related to policy formulation, coordination, planning, research, and international cooperation, etc. He obviously has a political background as, a member from VITA. He now is in the Jubilee Coalition. Some of the achievements: boosting of Pan-Africanism by issuing visas at arrival for all Africans visiting Kenya. Of course, that was the latest announcement that we heard. We have had some significant tourist numbers going up, not as much as they wanted. 1.7% growth at the Moi International Airport, Mombasa, from 66,699 visitors to 65,600 in 2016. At JKIA, arrivals grew by 11.1%, much better, to 655,569 compared to figures of 2016. Total international arrivals from January to September 2017 by air and sea closed at 723,174. That's a growth of 10.4% 10% from the previous year. And so basically tourism has been on the up, but not as much as they had anticipated, especially owing to the prolonged electioneering period. Danston, what do you think?
For Balala, before I talk about Balala, let me say that I endorse the two for endorsing Cecily Kariuki. That is a perfect CS for agriculture. Okay. She has the charisma, she has everything.
Let's revisit that when we talk about agriculture and tourism.
For Balala comes up with a person who has a vision. He has the expertise of tourism. He has the face that represents assurance for foreigners. Whenever he appears...
What does that mean?
I mean
he has the face that assures...
When Balala appears in an international conference, the people are very, very careful looking at the body language. Balala assures foreigners that they are very safe in this country. And he assures them and gives them that encouragement. When you say Balala, you see a man determined to turn tourism in a different manner. The new areas of tourism that are being explored, Balala takes the credit. The only challenge Balala found is that the political environment was so toxic to the point that his efforts were being frustrated by elections, constant political issues, but he still maintained that trajectory of more visitors coming to this nation. So in my own view, Najib Balala should be retained and in the same position. He's young. He's a man with a vision. He's a man who brings everybody on board. He does not polarize any other person. He is a politician, but you not find anywhere either NASA or Jubilee arguing with how he handles his mother. He is an all-inclusive minister. And to me, that is the minister to be retained because we are underperforming in terms of tourism. If we really invest much, and Parliament allocates more resources to tourism, and the political class restrains itself from making politics a threat to tourism, then we'll achieve huge numbers of tourists in these nations. To me, I give him 95% for return.
What do you think?
And I agree because Balala brings passion and dedication to his work. He is also fiercely loyal, which is a complementary issue, because as a politician, the fact that he's not too disruptive and he's not struggling for attention, the way we've seen some politicians turned CS, I think he's done really well on that aspect. Anybody who says that Balala has not performed, in the words of Chinua Achebe, is either a fool, a crook, or does not live in this country. I think the man has exceeded expectation, and if there's someone who requires a commendation for a job well done, it's Balala. Retaining him would be a victory for common sense. If Kenyatta is looking for consolidation and also broadening our tourism base.
I beg your pardon. I wasn't expecting you to say that. Steve, well done.
Okay.
All right, okay. Let's move on to, excuse me, Honorable Eugene Wamalwa. He is the Cabinet Secretary for Water and Irrigation. The mandate of the ministry, quite quickly, accelerating the implementation of water sector reforms, improving the sustainable management of water resources, improving provision of water and sewerage services, improving utilization of land through irrigation and land reclamation, strengthening institutions in the water sector, etc., etc. He, of course, is not new to cabinet in Kenya. He was a one-time Minister for Justice. He's also a politician, has represented Saboti constituency. Some of the achievements and challenges so far, so we have, I think the 5 billion preparation of for the Lower Nzoia irrigation project phase 1, which has kicked off, and the Lower Nzoia river flood mitigation structures. I think that's the Budalangi dikes. That was done in partnership with the National Irrigation Board. There's the construction of the 35 billion shilling Mwache Dam in Kinango. That's Kwale. And then there is the signing of a 42.52 billion Fuake multi-purpose project that is meant to be done through the State Department of Irrigation. But obviously the irrigation project as envisioned by Jubilee of putting that 1 million hectares under irrigation hasn't happened. Some called it a white elephant at some point, Prof. So mixed bag. I think irrigation is what really worries a lot of people when you talk about the country becoming food secure, but also, you know, water provision. And then this is, you can't exclude counties from this conversation, you know. Counties like Nairobi are really struggling with water provision. There are estates that haven't had water for years and still don't. So how do you think he's performed?
I think he is a late comer in the cabinet, so he has not stayed long. But one of the things that Eugene Wamalwa has is he's extremely articulate, and he makes brilliant comments, and he recruits people on his side whenever he wants things done. So he's quite visible if you look at his performance across the country. I think he's a better a better technocrat than a politician.
Okay.
If he talks to me, I would tell him to completely quit politics and serve this nation in the capacity he's doing, because he does very well. So you hear him in Muranga over dams, you see him on boreholes in Marsabit and other places. The crisis at Bura over the irrigation is not actually Eugene Wamalwa's making. I think it would be fair to him. He found this crisis going on. It was a flagship project for the Uhuru administration from 2013. But I think there were so many other things that were involved, and a lot of people might have even been involved in some maleficence and taken away money, and the structuring was bad from the beginning. The scientific aspect of it was wrong. So, but in terms of his own personal performance, I think he has shown that he can do well in a ministry. We haven't seen a lot of calls for corruption in the ministry research. He hasn't also showed any handicaps. You know, he has a technical background of being a lawyer, but he's doing a job of Minister of Health, Minister of Water. And so, Minister of Water, you know, you would expect that he would take long to adjust to the demands of the ministry, but he took a short time, hit the ground running. I think he has a lot of political capital for Uhuru Kenyatta, but he also has the desire, the drive to do the job. I think he needs him. So is
he best placed in water?
I think we are discussing water. He hasn't done badly. Maybe there are better Kenyans to do the job, but we're talking about his being retained in the cabinet. The president can still redeploy him in a different capacity if we get a better person to do the job. But even with the fact that he doesn't have a water trading background, whatever he has done means that we would like him to be retained.
What about the larger question of how to reward the Western belt? Might that prescribe different names other than he to cabinet? I mean, did he bring the political capital that was needed to take Western, you know, because CSs were very, and you know, appointing political CSs was part of reaching out. So I'm just wondering, what do you think of his performance in that respect? And when you look at post the election, the larger performance of Western Kenya and the picks that the president has in terms of balancing who should be in cabinet, is Eugene still going to be top of mind?
You see, if the if the president's consideration is to lure the entire Western to his side, Eugene Wamalwa is a miserable choice, because that means he doesn't deliver much. But you know, in 2013, 2014, 2015, that was a requirement because Uhuru needed that. But right now, Uhuru does not need this balancing. He's doing his last term. So probably he will look for a person who can do the job, even if he doesn't deliver the vote. And I think for that, Eugene Wamalwa, whoever wants to take over from Uhuru would be worried about that. But for Uhuru, he just wants a minister who is performing. So I don't think Eugene Wamalwa has a problem.
Okay.
What is a big question? And we must segregate the issues about water very carefully, because a large aspect of the water issue relates to legislation. It relates to the convoluted water institutional framework that we have in this country. And whereas it is true that Eugene Wamalwa had a very short stint in the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, I think he's done very well. And if I was looking up to appointments of that nature, I would retain him for this very important reason. In the short time that Eugene Wamalwa has been the Minister for Water and Irrigation, he has managed to do a number of things. First and foremost, he's changed the water sector legislation tremendously. For instance, what used to be the National Water and Conservation and National Water Conservation Institution has now been created under an Act of Parliament as opposed to a Gazette notice, so as to give it more effect so that it can operate nationally much more better. There have been very many disputed dams going on across the country. You remember from the Charity Ngilu era, like a good example is the Umar Dam in Kitui, there's the Badassa Dam and so on and so forth. The minister has managed to resolve these issues very quickly, and government is now in the process of actually developing these dams so that they can give water to the residents. So I think that understanding law the way he does, being a very cool and calm and collected person the way he presents himself to be, being very articulate and focused on policy and its implementation, I think he is the correct person to harness all these issues and put them in a bag and then prescribe the right legislative and policy framework for the movement of the policy of the water sector forward. I think he should be retained.
Okay, Steve, very briefly, your dissent.
I hold a different view. President Kenyatta, could you please circulate Eugene Wamalwa out of the cabinet? I think he's, unlike Balala, Eugene is distracted. He has not disinherited the thought that he was part of the G7, and he seems to wear power and thinks that whatever he's doing should be focused on creating a platform for politics. Now, for second legacy, for a legacy... What
gives you that impression? What specific things give you that impression?
I think if you see Wamalwa's approach to work, in fact, I disagree with what Mambole is saying, because as a lawyer, he knows he has not supported harmonization of legislation and the functional integrity between national level and the county levels. We have a lot of duplicity. You know, the water authorities, running parallel structures in the counties, national structures in the counties, and duplicating what the counties are doing. Even in terms of reading and harmonizing the law, he has failed. In terms of wearing power with humility, he's a CS. And like Balala is a politician, a seasoned politician, part of the G7, he has failed. I mean, for me...
Really? Of all the CSs, Eugene is the one you're going to say doesn't appear humble?
What I would say, if he was circulated out of the cabinet, there would be no harm to Jubilee. There would be no harm to Uhuru Kenyatta, and you would find someone there who's determined to deliver and not distracted for creating a platform for political office.
Who is not getting a platform for political office? A lot of these guys are doing the same things.
But I think when I look at Eugene, he's the only minister you have seen holding consultative meetings with the governors. Look at what happened in the Lower Eastern, the combination. All the governors joined together to agree on issues that could never have been agreed about the dams of water. So in my own view, Eugene was misguided. I agree with you, when he was appointed and he was told that start preparing to be the governor of Nairobi. The moment he realized that he can never land that position, Eugene went back to start working as a CS for water. In my own view, I still endorse that he needs to be there for the survival of the water sector, because water is life in this nation. And Eugene seems to have provided the leadership to me. I think.
Okay, so what do you know of all the people that we'd have a debate on? It's on Eugene Wamalwa. Okay, fine, let's move on to Mwangi Kiunjuri, who is the minister, and you're laughing even before it starts, of devolution and planning. Obviously, he took on this position after the exit of Anne Waiguru, but to a smaller ministry. So the mandate is to provide leadership, coordination, and an enabling environment for planning, transformed public service delivery and management of the devolved system of government. You'll remember he was to run for Laikipia governor, I beg your pardon, but the president prevailed on him not to do so. He's been the face, if you like, of the Kenyatta succession battle in central Kenya. So he's embroiled in that tussle with area leaders. So some of the achievements, you can say somewhere inherited from CS Waiguru in terms of the Huduma Center's performance. And then it was under Waiguru, of course, that the transfer of functions and responsibilities was done. But there was a lot of problems with the intergovernmental mechanism. And it appears that that in some ways is not as acrimonious as it previously was. So there you are. What do you think? I
think while I was laughing, I was looking at the paradox of Kiunjuri. Kiunjuri comes midway, just like after Waiguru leaves. Kiunjuri comes from a background of not being a very rich person in an area where billionaires exist. Kiunjuri comes to cabinet in a ministry that very many opposition people do not feel that it should exist. The question of devolution, to very many, especially the NASA brigade, sees it as an impediment towards the aspect of devolution. But Kiunjuri has managed to calm down the battles between the county governments and the national government. So Kiunjuri has delivered, according to me. The only challenge Kiunjuri has is that he had an ambition to be the governor. The president told him not to contest. Will that materialize? Professor Saitoti at one time was told by President Moi at Kasarani that urafiki na kazi ni tofauti. Will the president allow Kiunjuri to proceed? To me, he comes as a very sober, down-to-earth cabinet secretary. And if there is anybody who should be retained because of age, because of work, because of delivery, it is Kiunjuri. Kiunjuri does not suffer from any tribal tag others are carrying. So in my own view, Kiunjuri will have to deal with his people from his background who see him as probably a likelihood of a successor in central Kenya, because there seems to be a lacuna after President Uhuru Kenyatta.
And that is my question, Prof, to you. Will that then affect what, the president's decision in keeping him in cabinet? Because the Kenyatta succession issue is a real issue. And, the president cannot run away from that either. So do you keep him in cabinet? Do you allow him to realize his aspirations of politics past, How does this affect the balance?
It depends on which side of the coin the president is operating with regard to 2022. If he's relevant to his own equation, what he would like Kenya to be like in 2022, he can retain him. But if he thinks that he undermines that goal, he can throw him out. But for me, that is not the most important thing. I differ. In fact, my brother, that's Omar, is saying that he should be retained. Zero. He should.
Nothing.
In fact, he should go. That is one of the cabinet minister. He spends too much time on politics, and sometimes he just raises hot air, talks things which are reckless. I'm surprised that you don't even see that some of the statements that Kiunjuri makes can be divisive. So you see him as a calm guy. I think sometimes he releases statements which are not based on calculation, and you should replay all the videos of what statements has come from Kiunjuri. I think the best thing is that
isn't this exactly what the government wanted when they appointed the Kiunjuri?
We are talking.
We have some political fight,
Yes, he has, but now what is he fighting? Devolution has had a problem. And it has had a problem, and he doesn't come out to explain why it has a problem. When there is no money going to the counties, Kiunjuri is absent. But when it comes to talking politics, Kiunjuri is always present. You get the impression that the ministry that was given to him, generally, cabinet for Kiunjuri is oversized shoes. He does not belong there. I think he should have been allowed to go and do politics and become a governor. But as a cabinet minister, I think these shoes are too big for him. He should just be assisted to get out, or even ask the president not to consider him.
But that would be so unfair. You ask him not to run and then now kick him out.
No, I'm saying that was a mistake on the side of the executive. He can do very well because he does a lot of politics. Let him go. Let me assist it, even through a by-election of sorts, and then he becomes the governor. We cannot endorse that view, because what would occasion that by election. All right, let's move quickly, gentlemen. We're running out of time. Charles Keter, he is the Minister for Energy and Petroleum. Of course, the mandate being the energy policy and development, the hydropower development, geothermal exploration, thermal power development, oil and gas exploration, etc., etc. He was the senator for Kericho until he was picked to replace Davis Chichir as Energy Cabinet Secretary. Obviously, is also a key ally of the Deputy President. Some of the achievements: the improved electricity connection to homes from 27% to 60% in 2017.
97% completion of the Mombasa-Nairobi oil pipeline. The total installed capacity improved from 32% in 2017. New primary school connections have been up 98.8%. Improved transmission lines and lots. I cannot go through this entire list. So there you are, last mile connectivity being something that, you know, this administration is really boasting of. Politically, certainly an ally. Performance, I mean, is this really him being a great performer in cabinet, or is this more about goodwill from the top two to ensure that this connectivity happens and he's the beneficiary of it?
1 second before I move to Keter.
No, absolutely not.
Jury, no retention.
No, go ahead. Go to your point now.
Yes, to my point.
Right.
The Ministry of Energy is a key pillar in driving economic growth. We do understand that, of course, if we want to achieve quick industrialization, we have to resort to manufacturing. We have to reduce the cost of energy, the cost of power. You now hear discussions about resorting to production of power through nuclear energy and so on and so forth. When I look at the person of Charles Keter, a very tactful person, extremely experienced politically, and I think it was a fantastic choice to get him out of the Senate and appoint him as Cabinet Secretary. So I think government has very good, solid programs on the production of energy and distribution and the lowering of the energy costs in this country. And I think, without a doubt, without saying too much, he's the man for the job. Okay,
let's move on to Willie Bet. We're not going to spend much time on this because we've talked about agriculture a little bit when we spoke of Cicely Karaoke and her background. Obviously, there have been issues in this ministry. You'll remember the acute maize shortage that was handled poorly. Many would agree. There's also the Galana Kolalu food security scheme, of course, that has not delivered what at least the public expected. But, you know, there have been subsidies for fertilizer since 2013, payments issued out for various livestock programs, you know, compensating farmers who've lost cattle. So it is still a mixed bag, good and bad. Should he stay or go? Steve?
He should go, because he has not, he lacks, he has not demonstrated capability to deliver, and also he seems to lack decisional independence, and he ways to take cue on the political elite, and he's more reactive than responsive to issues. He doesn't create solutions. Is the kind of cabinet secretary that if he goes, we won't even remember that he existed in that position.
That is just so uncut and raw. So is it a go from everyone? I don't want reasons. Go?
He must exit.
Go?
He must go.
Like yesterday.
Oh dear. Okay, Adil Mohammed. He is the industrialization cabinet secretary. You guys are not nice. The mandate being the implementation of industrial property rights regime, the cooperative policy formulation, private sector development, etc. He, of course, was a high flyer at Barclays Africa before he headed this way. He's an alumni of the Harvard Business School. So some of the achievements: Kenya's overall ranking in ease of paying taxes improved 33 places to position 92 globally, according to, which is a build-up of the World Bank Doing Business Index. There's been a slow start of the Ngozi Kenya Leather Park, citing various hurdles. 2017, Kenya was up 12 places in the Ease of Doing Business Index. So here you are. And then there's been challenges in terms of enacting the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy as aggressively as one would have hoped. So stay or go?
He must stay, but from his salary, he must employ somebody who can talk to the public. He's a very good trade industry, CS. The problem, nobody knows what he does. He sits on his desk, you only see deliverables. In my own view, he must be retained in the same industry and the same position, but he must employ people, either from his salary or he uses government machinery to explain to the public what Kenya is doing in terms of industrialization.
So stay, Prof.
He must stay.
Stay, go.
Just 1 minute. He can, you know, and if you leave this station and go to work elsewhere, and the only thing, even in the new station, they remember is that you worked at Citizen, you have not made an impression. Every time
I
you,
feel like it's not fair to use that
no,
example.
no, I'm just using an example because what we know about Aden Mohammed is that every time you hear about him, people talk about his credentials at Harvard and Barclays. But we don't hear the story of Aden Mohammed, which is in public domain, about trade and industry. So on that basis alone.
But there are all these companies that
But why
here.
do-
There's the ease
Well,
of
but
doing
why
business,
do-
which you've talked about.
No, but do you think Mama Mboga understands he's doing trade and industrialization? Do they, if you pick Mama Mboga in the streets, would they tell you they know what the
He
industrialization
will hire from his salary. That's what he said.
Yes.
He
Perhaps-
must hire somebody.
No, fair comment, but perhaps, and not to say that every Kenyan should not be co-opted in it, but perhaps to his key audience, which would be the industrialists,
Yes,
etc.,
yes.
on the macroeconomics, that they might know what he's doing.
They know.
Yes, you don't feel so? Okay.
I think he should stay.
I feel very strongly that probably he urgently requires redeployment.
For me, he goes.
I look at Aden and I think it was a really wrong move to get him out of Barclays. But anyway, even Barclays is declining in Africa, so it's not a very good track record to look up to. This is what is important. Kenya is starting to become a serious player within WTO circles. Okay? Remember that time when Mr. Kitui was the Minister for Trade. That is the kind of person we require at the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization. And I don't see that person in Aden Mohammed. He can be redeployed to other sectors of this administration, and I think he will do very well.
Okay.
At that level,
Okay, we've got to move on to Joe Mushero, who is the Cabinet Secretary for Information Communications Technology. He, of course, followed Matiang'i, who initially held that position. I won't go into the mandate of the ministry, but you remember he's a former Google executive. So here we are. Achievements, the school digital program, which was moved from education to this ministry. So children have been given tabs. The digitization, I beg your pardon, of government documents is a digital literacy program that is on course as well. The Ajira program, availing jobs for youth online. The government IFMIS procurement platform falls under this ministry in some form, but has been at several occasions compromised, etc. But there you are. Joe Mushero, quickly, Steve,
I think
go.
he should stay. He's an innovative leader, and given another chance, he's able to consolidate the gains that he's made in this first term.
Okay.
On my take, he should stay. That is the face of the next generation. He resembles the youth of this nation. He has the aspirations of almost 70% of the youths in this nation. And the question of technology and issues of digitalization of all ministries, plus the media, Joe Mushero should be retained in the same position and given more portfolio.
Go.
He should stay. I think he has not done anything to irritate me. And
Which is the most critical thing. Look here, did you get on Pop?
So I think he should stay and in the same ministry.
All right, gentlemen, we just have to wind it up now. Quickly with Judy Wakungu. She is, of course, the CS for Environment and Natural Resource. She was the first female faculty member of the Department of Geology at the University of Nairobi, so she is playing her strength, the first woman geologist in the Ministry of Energy and Regional Development. So she is technically in the right position. She initiated the plastic bag ban, I should say, in Kenya. She halted the controversial coal-fired power plant proposed for the seaside town of Lamu. Various other things in terms of, in Kenya-Tanzania relations, in terms of aerial counts for elephants and other large mammals. Unfortunately, I'm absolutely running out of time, so I can't go through this whole list, but there you are. Gentlemen, her performance?
She should go.
She should go.
The good professor should just go.
She should go.
I think there is absolutely no question about that. Look back to the Environment Ministry that Michuki used to run.
Yes.
That is the kind of ministry we are seeing there. I think that place is too big for her. And
does she know that there is river Nairobi?
Absolutely.
When Michuki was there, this river that we crossed to Ngara, it was so neat. So you can see Judy Wahungu's work by looking at the river that Michuki left when it was very clean. So you don't need to go far. You can go to other places, but we start with Nairobi. Does he even know how it looks like and how it looked when Michuki was there? So she should go.
And I agree with Prof because her performance has been underwhelming and inspiring, and she's only fit for dismissal. She's been unable to feel the pulse of the people, prioritization and communicating. Also in terms of building a collegiate approach, bringing in all stakeholders to work together for a cleaner, safe environment. Her spectacular fail is well documented and is only fit for dismissal.
Okay, quickly, I'd allow you to comment on the Attorney General, who, of course, is not a CS, but
the Attorney General
yes.
should have left us yesterday.
Oh.
How do you legislate that young lawyers cannot appear before high courts? Lawyers are lawyers. Advocates have a big issue. For the young lawyers, they need to appear before the Supreme Court. Two, the Attorney General seems to have forgotten who his client is. He is supposed to advise government. He has no business advising citizens. He does not have any constitution or elective office for that position. So my good constitutional lawyer should just not even wait. He should just say, I've done my job. Let me go back to the University of Nairobi to advise. The number of embarrassing legislation that the Jubilee government has faced in this from 2013 is because the Attorney General failed to do. On very many occasions, the Attorney General has said that he was never consulted, disowning a government collective responsibility argument. So if the Attorney General can distance himself that this legislation I was never consulted, then what role does he have?
Okay, I'll allow the advocates to speak quickly. You have 30 seconds. Stay or go.
The AG must go, because if you look at as a litigation lawyer, the cases that the AG is defending, some of them, you don't need an adversarial approach to public interest litigation. Some you can come and make concession and agree that here we have made a mistake, we'll correct. But you see the AG insisting on defending each and every matter that comes to court, some of which are outrageous position to even defend, and some of the lawyers have disowned those positions and have said, no, this one we can't defend. I think the AG has not inspired the leadership that is required of that office. And by the way, as a cabinet secretary, would like him to be reappointed so that he can be vetted afresh. This idea of succeeding himself quietly in office may in fact be unconstitutional.
All right, stay or go.
A brilliant man with a length of professional standing, a good constitutional lawyer. He's made his contribution, but I think he should retire in the public interest. He served his bit. I don't think he has much more contribution to make.
He should go.
All right. Thank you all. We've been asking you to tell us who you think should exit the cabinet. We don't have time to run through all the list, but some of the front runners on your list. CS Cleopa Mailu, who is the Health Secretary, Hassan Murio, who is the Sports Secretary. Look at you guys just whispering under your breath. And Jacob Kaimenyi, the Lands CS. So we don't have time to go through this feedback because we're absolutely out of time, but we certainly do thank you for it, and we'll be reading your responses. Thank you, gentlemen, for not mincing your words, clearly.
I'm very excited.
This is why I like my job. We don't go for bed. Thank you for watching tonight. God bless you. God bless Kenya. Good night. Good night.
Tell us.